Carlos Alcaraz, the world number one, chasing history at the Australian Open, trying to complete the career Grand Slam at just 22 years old, playing without Juan Carlos Ferrero for the first time in his professional career, had to cut his training session short on Tuesday. And when I saw the reports coming out of Melbourne, my heart sank a little bit. Because in tennis, these small things can become big problems real fast. Let me give you the full story here, because there's more to this than just a simple training interruption. Alcaraz was scheduled to practice on Tuesday, January 20th, the day before his second-round match against Yannick Hanfmann. The session started at 12:15 local time in Melbourne. Everything seemed normal. He was out there hitting balls, working on his game, doing what every professional tennis player does between matches at a Grand Slam. And then, 12 minutes in, he had to stop. 12 minutes. That's barely enough time to get properly warmed up. The reason? A blister on his finger. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this is nothing, let me explain why this is actually a bigger deal than it might sound. Because blisters, especially on the hand, especially for a player like Alcaraz who generates massive racket head speed and hits with incredible topspin, these things can be absolutely debilitating. They're not just uncomfortable, they can fundamentally affect how you grip the racket, how you swing, how much power and spin you can generate. According to the reports from Punto de Break, this isn't considered a serious injury at the moment. The Spanish tennis media is saying it's not something to worry about yet. But here's the thing, the word yet is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, because we've seen blisters sideline players before. We've seen them force players to change their grips, alter their swings, play through pain that affects their performance. And Alcaraz is facing Hanfmann in less than 24 hours. Think about the context here for a second. Alcaraz just got through his first round against Adam Walton. He won in straight sets, 6-3, 7-6, 6-2, which looks comfortable on paper, but he played for over 2 hours. He hit 38 winners. He went through a competitive second set tiebreak. His hand was gripping that racket for every single one of those shots, generating torque and friction and pressure. And somewhere during that match, or in the immediate aftermath, a blister started forming. The timing of this is what's really concerning me. We're talking about day 3 or 4 of a 2-week tournament. Alcaraz has potentially 6 more matches ahead of him if he wants to win this title. 6 more matches of gripping the racket, hitting hundreds of balls per match, dealing with the heat and humidity of Melbourne summer. If this blister doesn't heal properly, or if it gets worse, it could affect every single one of those matches. And we're not talking about some random ATP 250 tournament. This is the Australian Open. This is the one Grand Slam Alcaraz has never won. This is his chance at the career Grand Slam. Let's talk about what a blister actually means for a tennis player at this level. Most people think of blisters as minor annoyances. You get one on your heel from new shoes, you put a Band-Aid on it, you move on with your life. But for professional tennis players, especially guys who hit as hard as Alcaraz, blisters on the hand are a completely different animal. Every time you grip the racket, there's friction. Every time you swing, especially on serves and forehands, there's pressure on specific parts of your hand. If you have a blister in the wrong spot, it's like hitting a bruise over and over again. And here's where it gets even more complicated. You can't just not grip the racket. You can't just hit softer. Not at this level. Not against the competition Alcaraz is facing. If he has to modify his grip to avoid aggravating the blister, his entire technique changes, his spin production changes, his power changes, his control changes. Everything that makes him Carlos Alcaraz, the most exciting player in tennis, depends on him being able to grip that racket exactly the way he's trained to grip it for thousands of hours. The reports say Alcaraz was visibly concerned when he had to stop the training session. That tells you something right there. This isn't a guy who complains about minor discomfort. This is a 22-year-old who's played through injuries before, who's gutted out 5-set matches in brutal conditions, who's known for his mental toughness and resilience. If he's concerned enough to stop training after 12 minutes, there's something real going on with that blister. Now, the medical team can do things to help. They can tape it. They can use special blister treatments. They can modify his grip slightly with extra padding. But all of those solutions are compromises. None of them are ideal. Tape changes the feel of the racket in your hand. Padding affects your grip size. These are micro-adjustments, but at the professional level, micro-adjustments can make massive differences. We're talking about a sport where matches are decided by inches and split seconds. Let's also consider the psychological element here. Alcaraz is already dealing with the massive change of not having Ferrero in his box for the first time. That's a huge adjustment in itself. Now he's got to worry about whether his hand is going to hold up through potentially 6 more matches. That's another thing on his mind, another distraction, another source of potential doubt or concern. And in tennis, especially at Grand Slams, the mental game is everything. I keep thinking about the matches ahead for Alcaraz. Hanfmann in the second round should be winnable, even if Alcaraz isn't at 100%. Hanfmann's world number 72, and Alcaraz has beaten him twice before without dropping a set. But after that, if Alcaraz gets through, he could face Corentin Moutet in the third round, then potentially Alex de Minaur in the fourth round, with the entire Australian crowd behind de Minaur, then maybe Alexander Zverev in the semifinals, and then, if everything goes according to form, Jannik Sinner in the final. Every single one of those matches requires Alcaraz to be at his physical best. De Minaur is one of the fastest players on tour. Alcaraz would need to hit through him with pace and spin. Zverev has one of the best serves in tennis and can outlast you in long rallies. Alcaraz would need to be aggressive, taking balls early, redirecting with his forehand. And Sinner? That's the ultimate test. The last 3 Grand Slam finals have been between these two. To beat Sinner, Alcaraz needs every weapon in his arsenal, firing at maximum capacity. Can he do all of that with a blister on his finger? Maybe. Professional tennis players are incredibly tough. They play through all kinds of minor injuries and discomfort. But the question isn't whether he can play. The question is whether he can play at the level required to win 7 best-of-5 set matches against the best players in the world. There's also the practical question of how this happened in the first place. Alcaraz has been training at the Real Sociedad Club de Campo in Murcia for 4 weeks leading into this tournament. He's been working specifically on his serve, making technical adjustments to his service motion. All that practice, all those serves, all that gripping and re-gripping the racket. Then he comes to Melbourne, plays an exhibition against Alex de Minaur, plays the first round against Walton, and suddenly he's got a blister that's serious enough to stop his training. It could be the different conditions in Melbourne. Different humidity, different court surface texture, different balls. All of these factors affect how your hand interacts with the racket grip. It could be that the new technical work on his serve has created slightly different friction patterns on his hand. It could just be bad luck, the kind of random physical issue that crops up sometimes in professional sports. But whatever the cause, the result is the same. Alcaraz has a problem that needs to be managed carefully over the next 2 weeks. The thing that's really frustrating about this is that Alcaraz has looked good otherwise. His movement in the first round was excellent. His shot-making was vintage Alcaraz. He hit drop shots. He crushed forehands. He played aggressive tennis. The win over Walton, despite some wobbles in the second set, was exactly what you'd want to see from the world number 1 in a first-round match. And now, this blister situation has the potential to undermine all of that. Samuel Lopez, his new coach, is going to have to navigate this carefully. This is his first Grand Slam as Alcaraz's head coach, and he's already dealing with a physical issue that could affect the rest of the tournament. Lopez needs to balance giving Alcaraz enough practice to stay sharp with not aggravating the blister. That's a delicate calculation. Too much practice, and the blister gets worse. Too little practice, and Alcaraz loses his rhythm and timing. The medical staff will be working overtime to get this under control. Blisters can heal relatively quickly if you give them the right treatment and protection. but they can also get worse if you keep stressing them. In between matches at a Grand Slam, players typically practice for an hour or more each day. That's a lot of racket gripping, a lot of opportunity for the blister to get irritated. If Alcaraz has to significantly reduce his practice time between now and the final, that's not ideal preparation for the biggest matches of his life. I'm also thinking about how this affects his opponent's strategies. If word gets out that Alcaraz is dealing with a hand issue, even a minor one, you better believe the other players are going to take note. They're going to try to extend rallies, make him hit more balls, wear him down. They're going to target his forehand side specifically, knowing that's where he generates the most spin and power, which means the most stress on whatever part of his hand is blistered. Tennis is a mental game as much as a physical one, and knowing your opponent is dealing with any kind of physical issue gives you a psychological edge. What's interesting is that Alcaraz has actually been pretty healthy throughout his career. Unlike some players who seem to be constantly battling injuries, Alcaraz has generally stayed fit. He withdrew from the Australian Open back in 2023 with a hamstring injury, but other than that, he's been remarkably durable for someone who plays such a physical, all-court style. So this blister situation, minor as it might seem, is actually a bit unusual for him. The Australian tennis media is going to be all over this story. Any hint of weakness from Alcaraz is big news, especially given the narrative around him trying to complete the career Grand Slam without Ferrero. The press conferences over the next few days are going to include questions about his hand, about whether it's affecting his preparation, about whether he's concerned. Alcaraz is going to have to downplay it, say it's nothing serious, that he's ready to compete. But actions speak louder than words. If he has to cut another practice session short, people are going to start seriously questioning whether this could derail his tournament. Let me put this in perspective with some historical context. We've seen major tournaments affected by seemingly minor physical issues before. Rafael Nadal famously dealt with blisters throughout his career, especially on his left hand from all the topspin he generated. He learned to manage them, to tape them properly, to adjust his practice schedules. But there were times when those blisters genuinely affected his performance. Times when you could see him wincing after certain shots, adjusting his grip between points. The difference is that Nadal had years of experience managing those issues. He had a whole system in place with his medical team. Alcaraz is younger, less experienced with this kind of thing, and he's doing it without Ferrero, who would have helped him navigate these kinds of situations before. Samuel Lopez is competent and experienced, but he doesn't have the same 7-year relationship with Alcaraz that Ferrero had. He doesn't know all of Alcaraz's physical quirks and tendencies the way Ferrero did. The next 24 hours are going to be crucial. Alcaraz needs to rest that hand, let the blister heal as much as possible before the Hanfmann match. The medical team will probably keep it taped and protected. He might do some light practice, just enough to stay loose without aggravating the injury. And then he's got to go out there and play a second-round match at a Grand Slam, knowing that every forehand, every serve, every volley is putting stress on that blistered finger. Here's what I'm watching for in the Hanfmann match. Does Alcaraz look hesitant on his forehand? Is he abbreviating his follow-through at all to minimize the grip pressure? Is he shaking out his hand between points more than usual? These would all be signs that the blister is affecting him. On the flip side, if he comes out and plays his normal aggressive game, hitting big serves and crushing forehands without any visible discomfort, then maybe this really is just a minor issue that won't impact the tournament. The broader question is about Alcaraz's Australian Open curse, if we can call it that. He's never made it past the quarterfinals in Melbourne. He's had chances, but something always seems to go wrong. Last year, it was Novak Djokovic playing lights out in their quarterfinal match. The year before, it was Alexander Zverev in another quarterfinal. Now he's got this blister situation to deal with. It's like the tennis gods don't want him to complete the career Grand Slam just yet. But here's the thing about Alcaraz. The kid is a fighter. He's shown time and time again that he can overcome adversity. He saved championship points against Sinner in the French Open final last year. He came back from 2 sets down against Jannik Sinner at the US Open in 2022. He's mentally tough in ways that transcend his age. So if anyone can play through a blister and still perform at the highest level, it's probably Carlos Alcaraz. The Spanish Tennis Federation and Alcaraz's team are probably downplaying this as much as possible. They don't want it to become a story. They don't want opponents to see it as a weakness to exploit. The official line is going to be that it's a minor inconvenience. Nothing to worry about. Alcaraz is fine and ready to compete. But behind the scenes, you can bet they're taking this very seriously. Every possible treatment is being explored. Every precaution is being taken because they know how quickly these things can spiral if not managed properly. I keep coming back to the fact that he had to stop training after just 12 minutes. That's not normal. That's not precautionary. That suggests genuine discomfort, genuine concern that continuing would make things worse. The decision to stop was probably made jointly by Alcaraz, Lopez, and the medical team. They recognized that pushing through could turn a manageable issue into a serious problem. Better to rest for a day and hope it heals than to aggravate it and potentially compromise the entire tournament. The Hanfmann match is scheduled for Wednesday. As of right now, we don't have any updates on the blister beyond the initial reports. Alcaraz hasn't spoken publicly about it. There haven't been any follow-up training sessions that we know of. The world is basically waiting to see how he looks when he steps on court for that second-round match. That's when we'll really know whether this is something to worry about or whether it was just a temporary irritation that's already healing. What makes this whole situation even more dramatic is the context we've already discussed. The Ferrero split, the career Grand Slam chase, the Sinner rivalry, the fact that this is potentially Alcaraz's best chance ever to win the Australian Open. All of that pressure and expectation, and now he's got to deal with a physical issue on top of everything else. It's like a perfect storm of complications right when he needs everything to go smoothly. Tennis Twitter is already going crazy with speculation. People are debating whether this could be a serious issue or whether it's being blown out of proportion. Some are saying blisters are no big deal, that players deal with them all the time. Others are pointing out that hand injuries, even minor ones, can be career-affecting for players who rely on generating massive spin like Alcaraz does. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but we won't know for sure until we see him play. I'm also thinking about how this affects the betting markets and the tournament favorites. Alcaraz came into this tournament as one of the co-favorites along with Sinner. If there's any doubt about his physical condition, even doubt about something as seemingly minor as a blister, that changes the calculus. Suddenly, Sinner might be seen as the clear favorite. Djokovic, if he can get through his half of the draw, might fancy his chances more. Every player in Alcaraz's quarter is probably feeling a little bit better about their prospects. But you know what? I'm not counting Alcaraz out. Not even close. This is a player who thrives under adversity, who plays his best tennis when the stakes are highest, who's shown over and over again that he can overcome obstacles that would break lesser players. A blister on his finger? Yeah, it's not ideal. Yeah, it's concerning. But it's also the kind of challenge that might actually bring out the best in him. The next few days are going to tell us everything we need to know. If Alcaraz gets through Hanfmann comfortably and the blister doesn't seem to be affecting him, then this becomes a footnote in the tournament story. If he struggles, if we see visible signs of discomfort, if he has to retire or withdraw, then this becomes a major storyline that dominates the conversation for the rest of the Australian Open. What I can say with certainty is that the tennis world is watching. Every practice session, every press conference, every moment Alcaraz is visible between now and his next match. People are going to be looking for clues about that blister. Is he favoring the hand? Is he grimacing? Is he adjusting his grip? These tiny details that normally wouldn't matter are now going to be scrutinized intensely. And Samuel Lopez is experiencing his first real crisis as Alcaraz's head coach. This is what coaching at the highest level is all about. It's not just the tactics and the strategy, it's managing these kinds of unexpected situations. It's keeping your player mentally strong when physical issues arise. It's making the right decisions about practice schedules and medical treatment. Lopez is being tested right now, and how he handles this situation could set the tone for the entire coaching relationship going forward. The reality is that professional tennis is brutal on the body. Players deal with minor injuries and ailments all the time. Blisters, muscle strains, joint soreness. It's part of the job. The best players are the ones who can manage these issues effectively, who can play through discomfort when necessary, who know when to push and when to rest. Alcaraz is learning these lessons in real time at the Australian Open. So here we are, Carlos Alcaraz, the world number one, chasing the career Grand Slam, playing without his longtime coach, now dealing with a blister that forced him to stop training the day before his second-round match. It's not the story anyone wanted to write. It's not the storyline that makes for great tennis. But it's the reality of where we are right now. Tomorrow, when Alcaraz walks out onto court against Yannick Hanfmann, we're going to get our answers. We're going to see whether this blister is a real problem or just a minor hiccup. We're going to see whether Alcaraz can push through the discomfort and play his game. We're going to see whether this becomes a defining moment in his Australian Open campaign or just a brief scare that ultimately doesn't matter. My gut tells me Alcaraz will be fine. He's too talented, too determined, too mentally strong to let something like this derail his Grand Slam chase. But tennis has a way of surprising us. Small things become big things. Minor injuries become major problems. And sometimes, despite our best predictions and analysis, the unexpected happens. For now, all we can do is wait and watch. The blister story is out there. The concern is real. And in less than 24 hours, we'll start getting answers about whether this is something that will haunt Alcaraz's Australian Open campaign, or whether it's just another obstacle he'll overcome on his way to tennis history. Either way, it's going to be fascinating to watch unfold.